see the outside, but white lies turn to purple elephants. How many times will I have to tell you it? I hope you know how to live with it, cause it's not going away. Don't try it on, don't try it on. White lies turn to purple elephants. Don't try, you'll become irrelevant. You can't train a purple elephant, give it a name and try to lock it away. But how can I take you seriously? You live with purple elephants. You think I'm being dramatic, it's the habit that'll drive you away. Yeah.
Hello there, and you are there, and I am here, and this is episode 27 of Killing Time. The Silence of the Leans. Named so ironically, because Sandra Lean's back. Sandra Lean's doing more podcast appearances on YouTube. This time, with the channel Mocha Mysteries, who had done a video covering the case from Sandra Lean and Scott Forbes' books, and had been corrected by Sandra Lean. She wanted to keep the record straight. Remember, she likes to do that. So she popped on a video with Mocha Mysteries to go through a couple of details and correct her on some of the things that she'd got wrong. Well, I'm not a big fan of Mocha, so it's tea time. And the T stands for truth, because today I'm going to go through a couple of bits that Sandra pointed out on her appearance on the podcast, and she's still telling the same lies that have been proven wrong by transcripts. And if the podcast host had dared to even read a little bit of the transcripts, she would see that what Sandra was saying was lies. But like everyone else, they dismiss court evidence because they have evidence from two fake experts who wrote a book and self-published it on Amazon. Because that's how experts work nowadays. That's all you need, a self-published book. Let's just ignore the fact that Sandra Lean is not a criminologist, and she has never worked as a criminologist. Let's also ignore the fact that if you go on the Law Society of Scotland website and search for Scott Forbes' name, you will find nothing, because he has never been a lawyer, and that you can't fake. So let's get, well, there's another couple of things we'll kind of go across with this one as well, but there's a fair few lies and things we have to cover in this podcast. Now, I don't want to go the 45 minutes that they did, but like I say, I do want to cover a couple, so let's look at some.
No, I've explained this on a number of occasions, and it is quite subtle. And unless you understand the way these things work in court, it's really difficult to grasp. But Luke's brother's early statements were taken in the house, no big deal. And then nothing happened, as far as his brother was concerned, for 9.5 months. And then he's going to work one morning, and he comes across a police roadblock, which he thinks is for people that don't have road tags or whatever. The next thing, he's descended on by half a dozen police officers. He's dragged out the car, he's thrown face down on the road, all these officers screaming at him. He's bundled into a police car, he's taken off, and he's held for 6 hours for interrogation under the same rules that allowed them to do this to Luke. So interrogated for 6 hours, no legal representation, police officers screaming at him. And in this interrogation, they started saying to him, "We don't believe your story. We think you and your mum are covering up for your brother. We don't think he was home." And they just blew his mind. There is a question about him being on his computer and things being on his computer. And he's like, "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about." And then nothing again for another year until it comes to court. And then it's put to him on the stand. You were watching I don't know if I can say this, we might have to bleep it out. You were watching pornography and you were doing things while you were watching pornography, weren't you? And there's this, it's all put to him, and he's agreeing that these suggestions could have happened. He's not saying they did. He's not offering this information. This is being put to him on the stand, just out of the blue.
Out of the blue, yeah.
So when we looked at he did admit there were a couple of sites that he occasionally was on for.
Yeah.
And this particular day, the computer records show that he'd actually gone onto a car site. He was mad for cars and mechanics and all that sort of thing. And the so-called porn sites were a few seconds. And back in the day, you used to get what were called pop-ups.
Pop-up ads, yeah.
Yeah. So the explanation, the expert explanation was that these were pop-ups, but that didn't come out in court. It was all about he was looking at porn, and because he'd admitted that he'd sometimes visited these sites, they tied the two together. So he didn't change his story. These were put to him as suggestions, and he agreed that they could have been true, but he didn't say they were.
No.
So you see the slight difference there?
Yeah, see, when I read the news stories and articles, every single one was like, he changed his statement to this rather than the way that you explained it.
So the news reports had actually said that Shane Mitchell had changed his statements, Mrs. Mocha and Mysteries, because he fucking had 3 different statements in which he admitted different things at different points. One statement where he went back to correct issues with his previous statement after speaking to his mum and being coached into saying that he was in the house eating dinner. Literally changed the statement, literally went to the police station to change his statement, and then told another story in the other police interview when he was arrested and charged with perversion of the course of justice. So he did change his statement. Fact, absolute fact. He changed it, to 3 different stories. So there we go, changed twice. Absolutely did happen. Another quick one as well. Back in the day, we used to get pop-ups. Sandra, I hate to break it to you, buddy, but we still get fucking pop-ups. That's the whole thing about the internet. Pop-ups everywhere. But nailing down on that point, and the reason that this one is a big porky, is we all know, going back to Shane Mitchell's statements, that he admitted to being on the site The Hun. Now, what was The Hun? It was described as the yellow pages of porn. There was no pop-ups. Shane admitted to being on a porn website and then after the fact having a quick look at a car website. There was no pop-ups. Sandra Lean keeps telling this lie, and I don't know why. Because at the end of the day, if you go back to Shane's own transcripts, he will admit that, you know what, fuck it, let's put it in here. Let's go back to transcribed, I think it was episode 1 or 2, but regardless, let's hear from Shane exactly what the porn situation was.
Oh, we do know what you did when you got to your bedroom. He says yes. Okay, when we looked at a list of sites which were accessed, Mr. Mitchell, you were good enough to tell us that they were pornographic sites, but the description of some of them is quite revealing as well, isn't it? Yes. I don't need to take up your time with that, but taking it shortly, there are pretty graphic images which are available on these sites, aren't they? And he says, yes. And if you look at the report before you, production 167, you can see that Appendix C, there are some of the images reproduced. He agrees. And there are some of the images that you were viewing during the session, aren't they? And he says, yes. Session's an odd choice of words, is it not?
Yeah. It's interesting as well, I think, that they were so super keen to emphasise that his brother changed his story,
Yeah.
They barely touched the fact that the search trio, so the 3 members of Jodie's family who were out supposedly looking for Jodie that night, all changed the stories, all in the same way, to end up with all the same completely different story. That is documented. We have that. There's a lot of stuff online at the minute about, the transcripts don't show that. Well, of course they don't. Because these changes were in statements that never really made it into court. The defence did try to, bring them in, but at the end of the day, if the search trio say, no, we didn't say that, there's nothing that the defence can do.
Proof otherwise, yeah.
The reason the transcripts don't show that is because it's not true. On the stand, the search trio, as Sandra likes to say, because they always like to give names, we discussed that in the last video, give somebody a name so you can hate them, but the search trio had actually said that they agreed with their initial statements. When questioned about things, they said, well, if that's what I said at the time, that must have been true. So they did agree. I don't understand why Sandra keeps saying this. They agreed with their initial statements on the stand. That's what the transcripts show. I wonder if Sandra's actually read them by now. Well, she had 80% of them at all, or she had all of them, she didn't need any of them. There's a couple of different explanations. But yeah, if we're talking about changed statements though, we've obviously got Shane changing his statement twice, going to the police station to change his statement, which we've discussed. But we've obviously got the fact that when initially questioned as well, Luke and Corinne Mitchell said that Shane Mitchell wasn't home for dinner. In fact, Luke said the only time he saw him was at night when he got a torch off him to go looking for Jodie Jones at night. But Shane actually countered that by saying that the first he knew about it was when he got a phone call from his mum at the police station. So that didn't match up either. But again, that's the alibi that she was talking about there. And yeah, that's just Sandra still continuing these lies, even though the transcripts show the total opposite, which again, there's no explanation in terms of this is in police statements, because one, it's a cop-out. It's all the information's there, I just can't show you. And the other one, obviously, it still doesn't make sense because they agree with their initial statements when on the stand. So, I don't get that. How does that lie work?
It doesn't make any sense. I wish there was sense. Where did all this sense go?
Yeah.
The whole parka jacket, I have lost months of sleep over the parka jacket because he didn't, according to Luke's family and his closest friends, he did not have a parka jacket prior to the murder.
Okay.
But the police came and took all his clothes on the 4th of July, left him with only the clothes he was standing in. So his mum took him shopping the following week, and one of the things they bought him was a parka jacket.
Yeah.
And then the media photographed him repeatedly in said parka jacket. So when they were saying to people, have you ever seen Luke Mitchell in a parka jacket? The whole of Scotland had.
Yeah.
The question is, did you see him in a parka jacket prior to June 30th? There are no photographs of him in a parka jacket prior to then. There are a couple of witnesses who said they'd seen him in a parka jacket. One of them was asked on the stand, what made you note that he was wearing a parka jacket? And this lad said, oh, it was the murder and everything.
The idea that you need to have photos to prove that something exists, there's a couple of points I would bring up with that one. Firstly, it's a very childlike argument. Photos or it didn't happen, which is just ridiculous. Sandra Lean. The other one would be, I don't recall seeing any photos of Luke Mitchell before the murder of Jodie Jones in general, let alone wearing any kind of jacket. So that's just a strange argument there. And it's a easy cop-out, really. Photos, or like I say, photos or it didn't happen. But the reality is there was several witnesses. Some of them were Luke's friends that gave evidence and said that Luke owned a parka jacket before the murder. So again, it's just another lie, but it's one that Sandra will cling to. Like she'll go on. We'll take another quick point on this one before I carry on. Actually, why not? Carry on.
And then they claimed that the parka had been burned in a log burner in his mum's back garden. Yes, now we're getting towards evidence, except they took the log burner, the bricks, the grate, everything, forensically tested it to within an inch of its life, and guess what?
Nothing.
No evidence of a parka jacket or any other clothing being burned there.
Unidentified green fibres found in the log burner. What colour was the parka? Wasn't fucking pink.
The other thing that I found interesting is that they decided to put into some sort of evidence that Luke had used the speaking clock on his phone to know what time it was. He was like, why would you need to know that if you're at home and there's a clock? I'm just going to say now, I don't do the cooking in this house. My boyfriend does. Every time, we don't have a clock in this house, but every time he wants to know the timings of stuff, he says to his phone, what's the time, and he uses the same similar thing. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility that Luke did that on that day and just didn't have an explanation for it, because it's like something that you just do rather than...
Well, the phone records show that he had a habit of calling the speaking clock.
Oh, okay.
In the morning, sort of round about between 8:15 and 9:15. So time to get ready to leave for school.
Yes.
And in the afternoons between sort of 4:30 and 5. So he's getting home from school and looking at starting dinner, because he cooked dinner for the family.
Yeah.
So there is evidence there that this is something he did on a regular basis. But because this one night they need it to mean something,
Yeah.
they make a thing of it. But
If Luke Mitchell's phone data was deleted and destroyed for being opened in an unsafe environment, as Scott Forbes claims, but they have records of him calling the speaking clock between 8 and 8:45 and 4 and half 4 or what the fuck that Miss Loon just said there, then what does that prove in terms of if he killed Jodie Jones? I'll go on, just let's sit with that for a second. Tell me what Luke Mitchell using the speaking clock on another day goes towards him not being a murderer. Explain. It doesn't, does it? It doesn't. And what does that mean? Use the speaking clock. Wow. But one thing I just want to say before we move on to the next point, and it's really for Miss Mocha Mysteries here. You are comparing 2024 technology like Alexa and Siri and all the rest of it to a Nokia 3310 or whatever the fuck it was from 2003. That you are comparing societal norms for today with something that happened 20 years ago. And as an older man, I can tell you that since 2003, the world has moved on a fuck ton. And you are using your experience of your boyfriend being too fucking lazy to look at the clock on his phone, so he just speaks to his phone instead of just hitting the button so the clock shows up and he can fucking read it. So what is your argument there, Miss Mocha Mysteries, that your boyfriend uses Siri so Luke is perfectly innocent? That is a fucking stretch. That is a run, leap, a bus, a plane, and then a boat to get to that point, because that is just nonsense.
But the other thing about this is the witness that we talked about that couldn't identify him in court. She describes a guy standing at the entrance to the path, and he's got his hands out, and come a bit so that you can see. He's got his hands out like this in front of him.
Yeah.
At his sides.
Yeah.
Okay. This is at exactly the time that Luke's calling the speaking clock. So either he glued his phone to his ear in order to have both hands out in front of him.
Yeah.
Or the guy at the end of the path wasn't him. Because we know his phone is connected to the speaking clock at that exact time.
Yeah.
How on God's green earth do you know that was the exact time he was calling the speaking clock? That is nonsensical. How do you know that's the exact time, Sandra? Explain how you know that. Please, humour me.
Now that's really interesting, because They did try to claim that it was between 4:40. Now I have to get this absolutely right, or I'll get jumped on. 4:40 and 4:54, I believe.
Yes.
That was the time that she was passing the end of the entrance. And this is all manipulated to fit with Jodie leaving at 10 to 4, because had she left any later, the rest of the evidence means it couldn't have been Luke.
Yeah.
So they're manipulating this backwards. But this lady, when she first went to the police, gave a time much later. And the reason she gave that time is she said she'd gone shopping with her kids and she'd got home and her husband had called to say, I don't know, he was going to be late or whatever.
Yeah.
And she remembered the time of the call and reckoned she'd got in about half an hour before that. So that's how she knew what time it was. She then went and got her phone and found the call from her husband and took it back to the police to back up the time that she said originally.
Yeah.
And still, they worked the time backwards to fit this 10 to 4, 10 to 5 leaving for Jodie.
The receipts from Miss Bryson's shopping trip showed what time she was in the area, and with simple maths, the police were able to work out how long it would take her to travel from that shop to the area where she saw Luke and Jodie. Sandra is just clutching at straws, making up stuff, and this host is fucking just swallowing every single bit of it, because I suppose the conspiracy's sexy, like I've always said. Still, Sandra, I wonder what Luke thinks of this, because Luke wants nothing to do with you, and you're still going about promoting his stuff.
This is fine. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently. That's okay. Things are going to be okay.
Is they claimed at trial there was a missing knife.
Yeah.
And this empty pouch, this empty sheath, was evidence that a knife was missing. The knife wasn't actually missing. His mum handed it to his lawyer and his lawyer took it to the police. We have the statement from his lawyer that says so. But they have this empty pouch and they go, this must be the knife that you used and it's missing, so that must have been the murder weapon. There are a couple of difficulties with that. The first is that the type of knife that it housed, and I actually, I don't, it's the wrong one. I was going to say by pure chance, I have one that I found in the garden. It's nothing to do with the murder. No, I've moved it. But this knife that fitted in that pouch was too small to have inflicted the injuries on Jodie. It was just a tiny, a 2-inch blade or something like that. So I think my camera's just gone doolally. It was far too small.
You're in luck, because I know one or two things about this. I've just corrected you right off the bat there. It's a skirting blade. And again, people don't understand the difference between a blade and a knife, which I find is a bit silly if they're going to be talking about these kind of things. But so, where do we start here? Sandra Lean, the knife was not handed in. I keep having to go back to this. So the blade that was handed in was bought at Christmas after Jodie Jones' death, but there was witnesses to state that the knife, there was a knife that was in Luke's possession before the murder, and that knife has never been found. We keep going over this with Scott's nonsense, with Sandra's nonsense, but the reality is there's still a missing blade. The one that was handed in the day before the court case started. And but let's just not get away from the fact that Luke had a collection of knives. He just did. But the idea that there isn't a missing blade is just a lie. The point that the prosecution, I think, wanted to make was not only did Luke try and replace the parka but he tried to replace the missing blade. Corinne said that she had bought it for camping trips, but like Sandra points out as well, for once, she tells the truth, it's a skinning and hunting blade, so it can do a lot of damage, especially if it's kept sharp and not dulled. So this is just, it has to stop. It really has to stop. You, Sandra, Scott, you just have to see that the blade's missing. You just have to admit it. Even if you want to say that it's not the blade that done the murder, fair enough. It's still bollocks, but fair enough. But just get down to the main point. He's still missing a Jack Pike skunting blade. It's nowhere to be found. So just stop lying about it.
Is there actually any connection to the Black Dahlia case in this circumstance, or do you think this was another way of trying to demonise Luke in the media? Because I know that he didn't have anything to say that he was, like, he'd seen this Black Dahlia painting beforehand.
No.
So.
It was a complete red herring, and even the pathologist himself said that any similarities between the two murders were superficial.
This one's a great one, eh? Just want to quickly, superficial. The word superficial, not thorough, deep or complete cursory. I've had the most superficial knowledge of foreign countries as an example. Superficial can mean exactly that. Initially, kinda similar, not exactly the same. Nice play on words though, Sandra.
Well, the police officer who found the Manson paintings said in his evidence, at the time, these images were really, really difficult to find. You had to know what you were looking for.
Yeah.
Well, that suggests that the police officer knew what he was looking for, and the question is why, when there was no other evidence to suggest Luke had ever seen it?
Yeah.
How did the police officer know what he was looking for?
Marilyn Manson released the golden age of grotesque, along with a bass player called Tim Skold from the band KMFDM, which, if you want to know, stands for Kill Motherfucking Depeche Mode. However, it was a big thing. It was a big collaboration, and with it, Marilyn Manson was looking to get a little bit more attention in Hollywood. He'd been in a couple of things. He'd been in The Lost Highway and a couple other small movies, independent films, and he really wanted to break into Hollywood. So he went with the DVD, the films and everything else that came with it, and promoted the golden age of grotesque, something fierce. Really did. The Black Dahlia thing was known to have an inspiration for a lot of stuff that Manson done, and his paintings were quite well known. And if you were a Marilyn Manson fan or a metal fan or anything at the time, you probably would have seen it. Now, Luke would have known what to look for, because he was a fan of Marilyn Manson, as much as they don't say that he wasn't. Why the fuck would you buy a fucking CD and a DVD if you weren't a fan of a band? But in reality, what makes this all fall down is kind of the same when it comes to the forensic side of things, or the actual legal side of things, and the fact that Sandra Lean, Scott Forbes, and the majority of Luke's army don't know a fucking thing about the music scene that Luke was a part of. Now, they always refer to Luke as a skater boy, because they've heard the Avril Lavigne song and it's stuck in their head. If Luke was, as he makes out, the Nirvana fan, then he would be grunge. If he liked Marilyn Manson, he'd maybe be into metal, maybe even new metal, with a little bit Korn or Limp Bizkit or Rage Against the Machine, or I don't know who else was around about that time. Spine Shank or some shit like that. However, when Sandra Lean and Scott Forbes and everybody else talk about, they'll call him an emo or a goth or anything like that, it shows you how absolutely clueless they are. He's the furthest thing from an emo. He's the furthest thing from a goth. He's the furthest thing from a skater boy. He didn't fucking skate. So, and he had snowboard shoes. So how's he a skater boy? Anyway, they like to mix all this up because in reality they don't know what they're talking about. But when they can push this out there, people are like, oh yeah, no, you must know. When in reality they're just as clueless as well. Look into these things, guys. I mean, it's not like you can't show that I'm right here just by 5 minutes research. Nirvana grunge, Manson, metal. Probably liked a bit of them both. Seems like he liked his satanic metal as well. That's a fact. Let's have a quick, brief, very brief because it's terrible, quick, brief listen to one of Luke's favourite band songs.
Yes, forces of darkness, becoming from the emptiness of hell.
And that will do for that, because that is fucking immense. Anyway, yeah, let's get on to the next lie.
Yeah, because this is actually a combination of a number of stories.
Okay.
So the mention of the hair tie
That's
was actually in an interview with a reporter
okay.
who had jotted down in his notepad scrunchy ?
Okay.
And when he was questioned about what that meant, he couldn't remember. He had no context, just that he was having a conversation with Luke and this word had come up, scrunchy.
Yeah.
So in order to get round making it Luke who'd introduced it, they suggested that this is a word that the reporter himself would not have used, so it must have been Luke that used it. So it's not part of the investigation in which Luke mentions the scrunchy. It's in this conversation with a journalist. We don't know how much the journalist knew by that stage, and we do know that a lot was leaked to the media.
Yeah.
There is no context for that, so we simply don't know. We simply don't know. As for the clothing, no, Luke probably wouldn't have known from the scene what Jodie was wearing. For a start, her hands were tied behind her back with her trousers, so they were not visible. The rest of her clothing was strewn around in the dark.
Yeah, so he
But
would have seen it.
what Luke was referring to was the clothing she was wearing at school that afternoon. And during one of the interrogations, he said, that's the jeans she was wearing that night. And then he corrected himself and said that afternoon. Now, the lead up to that bit, every question had been about that night. And then it switches to what she was wearing in school. And he carries on and says that night, and then corrects himself and says that afternoon.
Yeah.
So,
Something that's very easily done. Like, you can very easily misspeak when you've been talking about one thing for a long time, and then.
So, according to Miss Loon, Luke Mitchell at no point commented on the missing hair scrunchie, or any kind of clothes or anything like that. So, I'll be honest, guys, I wanted to fire through this quickly, and it burns you out when you have to repeat yourself over and over again. So, can I just leave this one to the comments, please? Peter, are you around? William, are you around? Go just explain exactly why that one is absolute nonsense in my comments, please. Please. Oh, this woman. So there we have Sandra Lean's appearance on Mocha Mysteries, keeping the record straight, so to speak. Just to kind of summarise, I mean, she does have another podcast coming up, which I'm sure will be more of the same things, but if there is anything there, I might do something about it, but at the same time, it's probably just going to be the same thing, because, like I said in the last video, which is odd that it is coming to fruition, resetting the Matrix, and she's also resetting back to factory settings in terms of how she deals with things, which is a very softly forward facing look, but then accusations and whatnot through the story that she tells, without really going into any kind of details. And one thing that I would say as well is not as, controversial, I suppose, as Scott Forbes and the information that he decides that's worth sharing. Again, a lot of it isn't true, but that's very telling for me that Sandra Lean doesn't go into some of the stuff that Scott does. And it kind of does lead us on to a couple of things I want to cover at the end, which is basically Scott's lunacy. And I suppose before we do that, though, just to kind of wrap this up, Sandra Lean is definitely doing her own thing. Now, we know that Luke Mitchell obviously doesn't want Sandra to represent himself. So, why is Sandra Lean doing it? Now, is it for the love of the game? I don't think so. I think it goes back to the whole thing about funds, which is something that I'll bring up again when we go on to talk about Scott. So, it's, for me, she's just keeping the grift going and trying to save face. I think she's trying to cling on here. A couple of upcoming quick podcasts. At the end of the day, she's not done an update in a while, so why not? And the reality is, because there's too many questions to answer, I don't think any of these podcasters will bring up the fact that she's been dropped by Luke Mitchell. It's a worthwhile question. I'd love to hear her answer, but I don't think she'd answer it. So this, as I say, just if there was anything else in the podcast that I missed that you thought was worth talking about, absolutely go for it and put it in the comments below. But what we'll do is we'll go on to Scott Forbes' lunacy before we finish all up, and we'll do that through one particular point. So let's go back to Sandra Lean on one of the things that she brought up on that was listened to earlier on.
Because in quite a lot of the articles, there's no time for when she said that she'd gone past. It just says that she did go past at some point during the night before Jodie was killed, and she noticed that was happening.
Now that's really interesting, because they did try to claim that it was between 4:40. Now I have to get this absolutely right, or I'll get jumped on. 4:40 and 4:54, I believe.
Yes.
That was the time that she was passing the end of the entrance, and this is
probably one of the best and the quickest examples, really, in terms of the difference between Scott Forbes and Sandra Lean. The lunacy that Scott Forbes kind of shows. So in there you have obviously Sandra Lean talking about Andrea Bryson and the story behind that. Scott goes one further. Now, I'll straight up say Scott accuses Andrea Bryson of never being in the area, and she took the place of someone else on the stand in court to hide that fact.
You serious?
I did not misspeak. That is what Scott Forbes claims, that Andrea Bryson was never in the car, never seen anyone at the end of Rowan's Night Path, and it was her brother that had seen it, but she'd taken the place because of some kind of relationship that her brother had with, I think it was supposed to be Jodie Jones' gran. They knew each other, or anyway, regardless, the conspiracy just gets a little deeper. So apparently, I never like giving this guy much kind of showing in terms of what he posts, but I will show this just to show it in full glory. So he did at least blank out some names here. So, statement to be taken from Bill, who had said that his brother had told him that he had seen a young girl and boy who were arguing at the New Battle Road end of Rowan's Dyke Path. Result, it was established that Bill was Mark Bryson, and a statement was taken from him. So, this is how his little cult works. People share this. This is, don't get me wrong, I think X, Twitter, is definitely not a representation of society. You do kind of have to be a bit broken and to be on it, and I include kind of myself on that one as well, because it's a strange place. If you just want to be angry, I suppose, a lot of the time, a lot of people are. But as I say, his fan club do latch onto this and say that this is true. and I'll put up a couple of examples of that as well. So they buy it because they buy everything Scott says. So the thing being as well, I'll say as well, there was another conversation, just a quick point, the conversation that Scott was having with someone who sided with his viewpoint, who had accused Stephen Kelly of domestic abuse. And in the conversation, Scott Forbes came back and argued with him. He did. He was, that's not true, that's not the case, blah, blah, blah. And then 2 days later, no more than 2 days later, Scott was actually using that accusation as a part of, apparently, I'll put it up, serious mental health issues for Stephen Kelly. So he just then took that lie on board and then just made it a part of his own story and then added to it as well, because it's just the way Scott is, really, to be honest with you. But this is a part, I'll show you here, that's a part of the lunacy of Scott. Everything else, there's an extra layer to the conspiracy, and it goes a step further, in all honesty. There was a post that was put up during the time when I was actually just starting this video, and the whole, and I'll find it here actually, where are we? I did have it. Yeah, so the post itself talked about Freedom of Information Act, looking into police paid operatives in the Dalkeith area in 2003, where Scott says that Police Scotland spent over $1 million paying assets, but refused to deal with Dalkeith, specifically 100%, blaming it on David Dickey, was friendly with Dalkeith police. So like, what a conspiracy. He's really good at it. There was more to it, don't get me wrong. There's a lot more to his absolute lunacy and nonsense. And what Scott does is he just kind of goes, well, I've just thought of a crazy idea. Here it is, now it's your problem, deal with it. But yeah, he's absolutely insane. He'd said, what was it, the covert human intelligence source, some paid lump sums other than installments and monthly salary as to not bring attention to them. Dickey led shooting parties for Dalkeith police to Lammermuir many, many times. I mean, come the fuck on, guys. These people swallow all this nonsense up. Basically, Scott has made, I think, Alice Walker kind of like Tony Soprano in his mind. And it's quite funny, don't get me wrong, in that sense. It's not good for the family, but in the sense of looking at Scott's nonsense, the guy is an absolute unhinged idiot. He spent a lot of time on Twitter recently, going back and forth with his best pal, talking about me. Not talking about the case, not addressing any of the inconsistencies with what he says compared to what even Luke Mitchell says himself. He won't address any of that. He'll just attack people and accuse them of being all the same person. Because in reality, that's all Scott Forbes has, is his conspiracy and his personal attacks. And they go one and the same. If you look at the personal attacks that he says, even about the case itself, everybody's corrupt. Everybody's a secret homosexual. Everyone is somehow in some kind of like friendship with everyone else. Everyone's connected. Donald Finlay was connected. Everybody is in a conspiracy against Luke Mitchell. And they have been from the start. David Dickey, all the Jones family, all the police. And remember that lie a little while ago? Well, way back at the start of this all went. Even they had police officers that were related to the family. Where did that lie go? Scott seems to have dropped that one. Funnily enough, no idea why. Maybe it's because it's not remotely true at all. But as I say, Scott's not got anything but the conspiracy and the attacks. He doesn't even have Luke Mitchell anymore, because Luke wanted nothing to do with him. He was never a legal representative of Luke anyway. And the admin team, consisting of Luke's friends and perhaps current girlfriend, ? They are the ones that confirmed things that I have said for well over a year that Scott has never been a lawyer. And the Law Society Scotland website will show anyone that if they want to go and confirm it. Or even better, try and confirm that Scott is a lawyer. That's a harder one. I'll leave that one with you. So, the thing with the lunacy as well, I always find it weird that the softly approach from Sandra Lean and the like full-on tinfoil hat nut job side of Scott Forbes, again probably because of the booger sugar, but who knows, maybe just because he likes attention. But why does Sandra Lean never talk about these things? Why did Sandra Lean has never brought up the fact that apparently Andrina Bryson never saw anyone because she wasn't there? Now, you have to ask yourself, and it's back to a really old episode where I talked about Schrodinger's argument. The idea of two things existed at the same time. So, you have to kind of look at that either Scott's telling the truth, and all these things happened, and Sandra is keeping the truth from everyone when it could make a big difference, or Scott's lying, none of these things are true, and Sandra won't say them, but at the same time won't admit that Scott's a fraud, which, again, doesn't look good for Sandra Lean. So, which one is it? I mean, there's one more other thing I need to cover, but this is, again, it just goes back to the fact that these two aren't consistent, and they're supposed to be the case experts. Now, if these case experts differ greatly on such things as actual witnesses were real witnesses, what next? The other one was, of course, that Sandra Lean had said the confession that was made after the fact, they had no proof, they had nothing to back it up, and it wasn't someone that was connected with the case. That's not the story that Scott Forbes tells. So again, one of them has to be telling a lie. If any of them are telling a lie, how can they be telling the truth about everything else? We've shown here today that Sandra Lean is still sticking to the same provable lies as she always has. The pop-ups being a brilliant one. The changed alibi, to try to put the focus on the search trio, as they call it, when in reality we can see from just Shane talking in court that he literally went to the police station to change his statement. There is always a dark and sinister element with Sandra Lean, but it's more in the case of what she likes to kind of put in there as to people lying. Scott goes full-blown conspiracy here. I don't think he can really make sense of anything that he's saying here. I think what is the case that the police helped the family through David Dickey, who was a police informant? But I thought Alice Walker was a police informant before. But why would there be a police informant if there was police in the family? Surely they would just know anyway. But then we've got the legal profession. They were all in it together. Donald Finlay was friends with everyone, so they'd let everything fly. The conspiracy that people were testing samples to a certain point and then stopping and not bothering because they knew it wasn't looks. None of this makes any sense. And these two have grifted for quite long enough. As I say, Sandra Lean's going to grasp on to this last little bit, and she'll do another couple of podcasts, but Luke wants nothing to do with her. This is purely for her to save face and make a little money, if she can, with a few more book sales. Like the whole, I mean, she sells the books herself, so she can make more profit. The lie that Amazon were going to put up the costings for the books, but she would swallow some of it so that people could have it, the expense itself, it's absolute nonsense. You make your own rates on Amazon. Again, Google it. It's quite simple to actually fucking discover. But so before we go into the last little bit here, can anyone in the comments, why do these two insist that they have any kind of working relationship and understand when their stories are totally different? And let's bear in mind that Scott's book was proofread and fact-checked by Sandra Lean. You know what? Actually, before I go into that, let's just read something very quickly. A lot of people might think, how do we know that Scott Forbes isn't a lawyer? Well, as we say, the Law Society Scotland website, you can have a little search there. But I want to show you why. Let's just read straight from this and you can take from it what you will. So, meanwhile, Kelly has raised a civil action against Forbes at Stirling Sheriff Court. Sheriff Wilson Gilchrist granted an interim interdict which bans Forbes from contacting or threatening Kelly and making false statements about him. The bust-up led to revelations about Forbes' convictions. They include a 5-year jail sentence, later reduced to 30 months for robbery in 1992. Others included an assault and robbery conviction in 1989 and a possession of an offensive weapon in 2001. A Law Society of Scotland committee voted by majority to grant his entrance certificate into the profession in 2010, despite his past. But a source said, it's quite right that people should be given the chance of rehabilitation, but is it really appropriate, that a violent ex-con should be considered an appropriate person to become a lawyer. So that was after the gentleman that was helping Scott with his qualification refused to sign him off, and Scott made threats. So that's why Scott's not a lawyer, just in case you wanted to know. FYI, yeah? But the last thing, just to quickly cover, is the projection of this supposed respect that Scott has for Sandra Lean. He is one of the more faces than the town clock. Such the sun and the moon. He was defending Sandra's honour, because I was pointing out the fact, which I'll point out here again, and I will till the end of time, that Sandra Lean is not a criminologist and Scott is not a lawyer. Now, what Scott had done was, as I say, defending Sandra's honour by putting up. Sandra Lean did a podcast recently that can only help the case. Well, not when she's telling fucking lies, Scott, but anyway, digress. Sharon goes to the podcaster to say SL isn't a criminologist, but a PhD in philosophy, so undermine her. What? To undermine her. That's not how you... Yes, Scott. Intelligent lawyer. So, there we go. Again, she's not a criminologist. Anyway, philosophy is greater PhD, and Daphne didn't realise that. They are just sad, lonely haters. Sad, lonely haters. You know, what are you, fucking 14? Anyway, so no, PhD in philosophy can, in some way, inform a criminology degree, but it's not equal to or greater than. The exact opposite. That you could use your philosophy when you were studying criminology, but that doesn't mean that it equates to the same thing. It's two totally different fucking things. And again, this guy does not research anything, even in reality. Gone on about, what was it? The crime scene being bleached. People putting bleach down at the crime scene, not even looking into the fact that, bleach attracts dogs and animals. So how would that keep anything away? But it's alright, because he's changed his mind. It's citronella now, it's no bleach. The guy is, honestly, you just can't tie him down on the truth, because he never fucking tells it. And as I say, when it comes to sharing his stuff, I did show that a little bit earlier on. There's a lot more stuff that he puts up in terms of his claims. And funnily enough, it's all typed up on a computer and it's all in the same font, and there's no way actually checking metadata or whatnot, because he made it himself. That's what Scott does. He's sitting on his computer writing shit up. At least he's figured out how to change the colour of the text on some of them. But a lot of the stuff that he posts is just fake. A lot of the evidence and the investigation, big bunny ears here by the way, investigative stuff that he posts, it's all just fake. It's just typed up on his computer. And I can show it on some of them as well, because you can still see the damn autocorrecting the spelling suggestions on it. But the last thing, as I say, when it comes to this, the Scott, like, given this impression that he has a lot of respect for Sandra, it was all undone. And it was all undone by one post. And now Scott tried to walk it back after the fact. He did. But unfortunately, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle. So the post that Scott put up, there was a couple really that I just wanted to kind of point out. So the first one was with regards to money, which is always an interesting subject to talk about when it comes to this. So Scott had posted, if you know Sandra Lean, you know money isn't an issue. That's not what all the admins were discussing, remember? About, you know, the van, the loan of money, the blah blah blah. Anyway, Scott knows better. So again, the money they talk about was paid into Nicola Brennan's bank account, then transferred to Gemma. The independent bookkeeper is the latter relation. So there we go, folks. There's the independence for you guys. There's the independence for you. If Scott's telling the truth here, how independent's that? Not at all. But I think they and Luke Mitchell told the public lies to obtain money.
Drink it in, man.
Let's just have that last line one more time. I think they and Luke Mitchell told the public lies to obtain money. So that's Scott saying there that, you know, they didn't need money, they were obtaining it fraudulently. So when I had pointed out the fact, that means Sandra Lean is a fucking grifter, like I have said from the start, and he has argued against from the start, then well, I don't get this. So he tried to walk it back, but as I say, that's not how it works. And then later on went to talk about how he had never taken part in a group. Fundraising is not for me. To ask the public for money for testing, then not chase samples, is totally wrong. 100% legal aid was granted for QC, so to test the samples there would not have been any problem. No one knows how much was raised. I was told it would be paid to Luke Mitchell. So there's Scott telling you that the person he is defending and trying to get off of a murder conviction is lying to the public for money.
Tell me when I'm telling lies.
Scott does this for his own kicks, so that he gets attention, and he does not care who he throws under the bus. He's even doing it to Luke Mitchell, and by proxy Sandra Lean there, because if Luke's lying to the public and they don't need money for samples and it can all be done through legal aid, why was Sandra ever raising money? You can't walk that one back. You said it, Scott. So when you were bigging up Sandra and you were bigging up the campaign, you were raising money fraudulently, you were enabling them to get that money. You don't get to walk it back and then pretend you're nothing to do with it. You were in the jacuzzi with them all the time. What, now you're going to say they were all evil? Don't do that. They were all promoting you. You were all loving them. Everybody was your pal. You were one of their heroes. Stop pretending that you were nothing to do with it, and then throwing them under the bus after the fact, and still trying to pretend that Sandra's a professional on the other side of things. How many fucking personalities do you have, Scott? Because keep control of them, mate. You're worse than fucking Moon Knight. There's just wrap that up there. let's just wrap all of that up there, because my God, what a big bunch of bullshit from two bullshitters, eh? The lies continue from Sandra Lean, the same ones that she used all those years ago, but now she doesn't have Scott backing her up, so she's going to go the softly approach, and those sly little, oh but the family, oh but this, oh but that. Nonsense, Sandra. You're clinging on for what? Look what's not to do with you. I think Gemma got rid of you quite easily, didn't she? But she's willing to mow down any fucker that gets in her way, I suppose, and that included you. Mow down everything. Oh, remember that line? Oh, what a classic line, Gemma. Oh, the kind of person you want running a fucking miscarriage of justice thing on Facebook, eh? Someone that's willing to treat other people like that. The whole group, the whole bunch of them. Bullies, every single one of them. Scott's the same. He can't answer a question on X. All he can do is give personal attacks. Then he'd start some more conspiracy, bring in other people that he's argued with, decide that they're all involved with it, because he's got nothing. And I will say one thing, actually, during this wrap up. Scott had offered to come on this podcast so he could give his side of the story, and I'll say it here loud and proud. I don't platform fucking grifters. No way, Scott. I want you nowhere near this podcast. I would not give you the clammy sweat from my testicles if you were dying from dehydration. You are a vile, scummy liar, Scott Forbes, and people will eventually know all of it. And your legacy will be that you were a violent ex-con who lied about a murder victim to line his own pocket and look cool online. That's your reality. And as much as your groupies and followers and all the rest of it might not want to see it now, you know, listening to me saying this right now, that it is true. And it hurts you inside. You are a liar, a con. You have made nothing of all the things that you said. None of it was true. It was all in your mind. You're Walter Mitty. And like Sandra Lean, you've clung on enough. But enough people see through you. Enough people see through you. And I see that nowadays as well. So, keep going for as long as you can. But leave the innocent people alone. Leave everyone else alone. And just scream into the wind about how the police are apparently on hunting trips with gangsters who run drugs and all the rest of it. Oh, well, does it? The police gave back a list of drug debts. Again, man, I know you've been stealing my sayings, Scott, so I know you're watching these videos, but one that you've been using quite a lot that really does suit you. You're on the fucking glue, son. That's what it is. Get off the chewable glue. So what do you guys think? Not only does Sandra Lean continue the lies, Scott Forbes makes up brand new ones. Absolute insanity. And not only that, but then chucks Sandra, the campaign, and Luke Mitchell himself under the bus by saying that they fraudulently asked the public for money. And to the angry typers that are listening, to the people who still think that I'm a troll, then how does it feel knowing that the person that you're backing and the person that you are here to defend is conning the people out of money? According to Scott. So, maybe Scott's lying. Why would Scott lie? So you think Scott's a liar? You guys have to really reconcile with what's going on here, because there can only be one truth. There can't be three. So, figure it out. But, back to the people who came here to actually listen to what I had to say, rather than get angry for 50 minutes. Thank you very much for listening to this one. Let me know what you guys think. At the end of the day, what do the unhinged, smooth-brained ones think, in your opinion? Do they just keep going? Do they now just change tact and does Sandra Lean forgo the independent treasurer and just start taking money herself again? What happened to that money that was from before November 2023? We've never heard We've never heard what happened to that money yet. Strange. Bunch of grifters, bunch of cornies. I said it for the start, I'm being vindicated more and more by each update that I put up here. And if you can't see it, fair enough. But you're gonna be left behind. And if you still want to donate money to Luke Mitchell's campaign and Sandra Lean's book, remember guys, I do have a bridge to sell you. But thank you again for listening, and follow us on X. I will get back to Facebook eventually, guys, and I'll have it from a reliable source that we have a very interesting transcript that will be with us soon. So I might put out a little bit more rope for you, Mr. Forbes, to hang yourself, so that when that comes out and I'm proven right by the transcript, you're going to even look more like a fanny. Oh, sorry, you will
look like a bit of a cunt.
But with that in mind, as I say, please subscribe if you want to keep up. Throw us a sarcastic thumbs up. Leave a comment, but do not be a Derek. And enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Bye, have a great time.
White lies turn to purple elephants. Don't try, you'll become a